Good afternoon. My name is Wayman Griffin, and I'm the Vice President of the San Antonio African American Community Archives and Museum, and it is my distinct pleasure to be here on Black Video News with you today. We do have a special guest in the person of Miss N.Y. Nathiri, who is the Director of the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community, Incorporated. Good evening, Miss Nathiri.
Good evening to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to sit and talk.
Yeah, well, we want to welcome you to our fair city. It's been talked about, and I just can't believe that the day's actually here. We've had a whirlwind tour the last couple of days, and I just want to welcome you here first and foremost. And let's talk a little bit about your purpose for being here. You do know that we're involved in this project here with the museum here in San Antonio, and it was birthed about probably a year ago, and I don't know if you were aware of the fact that this month has actually been declared as Museum Month, and so we felt it was very fitting, and we didn't choreograph it that way, as you well know, but it was very fitting that you wound up here to culminate our celebration of week-long events that we've collaborated even with the Carver Library right here in the neighborhood.
Well, in fact, we do know it's Museum Month. Part of the programming that our organization sponsors is the Zora Neale Hurston National Museum of Fine Arts.
Okay.
And so we're very much involved with the museum world. It's really a pleasure to come to San Antonio and to help introduce to the community at large the fine work of SAAACAM.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. We do certainly want to say it's been a labor of love, and certainly we're encouraged by the template that we have in the way of the Eatonville product, and that I dare not call it a project because it certainly is off the ground and doing very well. Can you say a little bit, give us a little history about your background and especially your ability to maintain what you all have done in Eatonville?
Well, the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community was organized in 1987, incorporated in March of 1988, specifically to advocate on behalf of the preservation of Eatonville, Florida, popularly known as the oldest incorporated African American municipality in the United States. Zora Neale Hurston, the writer, folklorist, and anthropologist, born in 1891, died in 1960, has made Eatonville a literary destination through her writings. Many of your audience will probably know her classic novel, Their Eyes Are Watching God.
Right.
But the fact was, in 1987, in Orange County, Florida, and we're talking about Orlando as the largest city
Yes.
in Central Florida, and being the home of the attractions.
Okay.
But many people, most of the decision makers certainly, had never heard of Zora Neale Hurston. And Eatonville, which is located about 10 minutes northeast of downtown Orlando,
Okay.
and has a population of about 2,500, is known as a low socio-economic community.
Okay.
And in 1987, the Orange County Board of Commission determined that it was appropriate to 5-lane
Okay.
the 2-lane roadway that ran through the center of the town.
I see.
All right, so the Board of County Commissioners did not know, as I say, the name Zora Neale Hurston, and for them, Eatonville was just a little town that actually was indispensable and disposable.
I see.
Our organization came together to contest the county action. Now, it took us 20 years to get the road designed and widened appropriately,
Yes.
but we were successful. And in the midst of that lemon juice, what we did was to develop the Zora Neale Hurston Festival of the Arts and Humanities. And we are now in our 29th year. We're preparing for that, so that hopefully your audience, some of them, most of them, are all welcome to come January 20 through 28th, 2018. That is a lemonade. That is a lemonade. Since 1990, we've had about 1.2 million visitors as a part of that annual festival. And what that has meant is cultural heritage tourism.
Yes, ma'am.
As a part of the economy of Eatonville, has really demonstrated that though you may be a low socioeconomic community demographically, that if you have rich heritage and cultural resources, that there is a way to really invite the public to come and enjoy the heritage, the culture, the history. And so for that, and the fact that Everett Fly, who is San Antonio's national treasure, being a person who has a 3 decades plus history as a researcher of historic black towns and settlements, the relationship that we as an organization have enjoyed with him, there was a natural synergy in our being able to represent, my being able to represent the efforts that have been so well established in Eatonville as a way of encouragement to say that indeed that SAAACAM has a wonderful future in being able to develop and to market and invite cultural tourism visitors to San Antonio for the undiscovered and the unexplained and the unmarketed and promoted history of African Americans in this community.
Right. Well, and I appreciate you saying that. Certainly we feel in our hearts that San Antonio is probably the best kept secret around the nation here, and I think you've experienced a little bit of a taste of that. But we're just excited about the fact that we could pull out the real star power and have somebody like yourself come to our fair city and to help undergird, which is a major thrust for us. This visit of yours actually comes in conjunction with an endeavor on our part. We want to thank the Kronkowski Group, who has been very, very benevolent in their support of our endeavor. And so I need to say that too, because for African Americans, it is really something to see where people that don't look like us buy into our history and the culture. It's just something about African American culture that excites them to the point that they will literally put their money where their mouths are.
I think that what you said is very important. It's very important for a couple of reasons. One, people who are not necessarily of our heritage, when they support in this manner, it's because what they see is authentic, it is documented, and when you see truth squarely in the face, you submit because you recognize it for what it is. At the same time, and I understand the position and the reputation and the standing of the Kronkowski Foundation, for them being the pillars of the philanthropic community here in San Antonio, for them to embrace what SAAACAM is doing adds that level of credibility that you can't buy. It comes because it is authentic. So again, from my perspective, having worked for 3 decades in the field of historic preservation, cultural heritage, tourism, education, it's, I think that you can be very proud of where you are and the ability to really launch a wonderful program.
Sure, yeah. Well, you know, and when I think about where we are, and certainly as we look at what you all are doing in Eatonville as a template, and I think it's one that can be appreciated and applauded, not just even nationally, but internationally. And as you've alluded to at several presentations that we've had during your stay here this week, there are people coming from overseas and foreign countries, and it says something about the power of one. It is amazing to me to think that one lady, Zora Neale Hurston, will leave Eatonville, Florida, wind up in Harlem, USA, and go on to be a major player in what we now know to be the Harlem Renaissance. Talk a little bit about that and tell me what your feelings are.
Well, I would say that you are correct. It is I think it is the property of genius to really empower an ongoing legacy. And when you look at the body of her work, in other words, the folklore collections too, the number of novels, the short stories, you really have to pay homage to the brilliance. Right. We are told often that Zora Neale Hurston actually saved the town of Eatonville, because if we wouldn't have been able to produce the annual festival were it not for that content. Now, as you say, she is a global icon. She's a global icon, and a part of that recognition comes from her being the major female voice of the Harlem Renaissance. Zora Neale Hurston was a maverick. She was a writer and artist who really understood the power of the common people. She said, and this is a direct quote from her, that she wanted to focus on the Negro furthest down because she understood that the authenticity of the folk experience came from them. Now, what her genius was the ability to translate that folk material, because she is considered by the folklorists, the scholars, as a primary researcher and as a person that really was a pioneer in the field of folklore. And so what she did was to take those stories that she researched, primary research, and she applied them in a creative and literary way. In the time of the Harlem Renaissance, however, people like Richard Wright, the author of A Native Son, were scathing in the assessment, the criticism of her work, because Zora Neale Hurston wasn't fixated on race as a way of expression. She, as a matter of fact, I think that, as a matter of fact, I'm convinced of this because Eatonville is also my hometown. When you live in a place where race is not a primary factor or a factor at all because you're all black there together. And as she says, in Eatonville, you got what your strengths brought you. And conversely, if you were lazy, if you were not, in other words, you could not use as an excuse for your performance or lack thereof. And she really came out of that confidence. And so for her, yes, heritage and race were formative, but they were not a predicate for what you did. And I think, frankly, that a Richard Wright or people who did not really come out of that experience, they didn't have the experience emotionally and intellectually. It was probably foreign to them. Zora Neale Hurston was really, when you say, an outlier. And so during that time, she was seen as too folksy, too catering to another kind of dynamic. Almost 100 years later, however, the universality of her work, not dismissing, quite the contrary, absolutely, in terms of the African American experience, the rural Southern African American experience, and being able to relate that in a way that people, whether they live in Italy or the Middle East or Japan or New York City, they still have the ability to relate to that human factor, makes her a global icon.
Let's talk a little bit about the volume of people who frequent your festival. I understand there's an annual festival, and it's certainly Ms. Hurston's life accomplishments are celebrated. I do want to mention, however, that you are a pretty accomplished sister yourself, and an author, a very good and a prolific author in your own right. Tell me how humbling, how gratifying that is, first and foremost, and then let's talk a little bit about the festival and the
Well, I would say that it's, at this stage in my life, it's a great privilege to work with a wonderful team of people. And I say that in this sense. I have been really mystified in some ways. I have been in some ways mystified by the fact that within our group, African Americans, on an individual basis, we certainly have a representative number of brilliant people, individually brilliant. I think that we have underperformed in terms of what I would call the group dynamic, the team dynamic. In this country, it's corporate. In other words, the group has the ability to ascend. And to the extent that you work as a group, or you work as a team, you can really see the direct correlation to success. With the Zora Neale Hurston Festival of the Arts and Humanities, that's a message writ large. We just have a fine team of people, staff, volunteers, and over the years, we have been able, because of institutional memory, because of the way that the festival is organized, really to deliver a very fine cultural heritage product, which means that people come back year after year, new people come, and because we've been at it so long, it's not unusual for people to say, you know, I've been trying to get there, I'm so glad that I've come, or I'm coming next year, and that's all right. If you didn't come 5 years ago and it takes you another 3 years to get there, you know, we'll still be there. So from that perspective, I'm very gratified because it's so nice to work within a team. You still have to work hard. Everybody works hard, but then you have that group dynamic. So that's a part of that. Now, in terms of the actual event, we grew from a 3-day event in 1990 through about 99 or 2000, and then we actually became a 9-day event. And the first 4 or 5 days are really designed more for what I would call people who are living within driving distance, or people who have a condo or a timeshare and who want to come in.
I see.
So that, for example, this cycle for 2018, we will begin Saturday, January 20, and we will run through Sunday, January 28. You can find the full schedule at www.zorafestival.org, or you may call 407-647-3307. Typically what people will do is to travel in on that Wednesday. In this instance, that will be Wednesday the 24th of January. And then they will participate in what I'd call an extended weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It is a multidisciplinary event, which means on Thursday and Friday, if you enjoy conference, public talks, that kind of, we'll have, for example, Sonia Sanchez will be a keynote speaker. We will have the former senator from Florida, Senator Bob Graham, and his co-author, Chris Hand, looking at democracy. We will be looking at some policing issues. On Friday evening, then we start what I would call the popular culture and the general audience programming. Those who are into line dancing, we're going to be cutting the rug with the master, the MC and the producer, Gerald Green. And I call that name because he does have a following. On Saturday morning, we'll be doing Hatitude. We say if you're not wearing a hat, you can't come in. And that is the crowns and the men who wear their Stetsons. Then on Saturday afternoon, the Zap Band will be the headliner festival featured performers. Of course, there will be other performers as well. And then on Saturday evening, we will be in conversation with David Banner. Some people may know him as a rap artist, but over the years, he's also cultivated a high respect as a cultural commentator. On Sunday, we will finish with a Sunday morning worship service, ecumenical, because in a traditional historic community like Eatonville, the Christian fellowship, the worship service is an integral part of the community experience. And then for those of us who are older on Sunday, we're going to enjoy the Motown Tribute Review. So that is the overall overview of the festival. Again, www.zorafestival.org, as well as 407-647-3307 for tickets. And I have to give a shameless plug because we are a non-for-profit. We are tax exempt by the Internal Revenue Service. And one of the initiatives that we are looking forward to is the building of the individual donor base.
I see.
You see that in what you're doing in SAAACAM, and I want to congratulate you because as you are rolling out and introducing yourselves to the community, you have put in place immediately this effort to engage the individual community member, because the donor base is very important. So as we were saying, the individual donor base is so important. And so when our guests visit www.zorafestival.org, they'll see the ability to invest and donate. And we have some wonderful premiums that we have as thank you, as we have as thank you gifts.
Sure. I appreciate you saying that. One of our focuses has been just that, of not just rolling out what's going on with the wonderful project in itself, as we know it as SAAACAM, but to also help people understand that this does not happen by chance. It is a very deliberate act, and if it's going to survive, and we are claiming more than survival, we're claiming completion, thriving and excelling in this area. But it's important that people understand, in order to say that we have this, you must support this. And let's talk a little bit about that. I do know that there has been a fair amount of support. We do also understand that sometimes your greatest level of support may not come from the immediate community, but I do see that to be a very key, a very essential factor. How do you feel about that?
It's absolutely essential. There is what we call a funding formula.
Sure, okay.
And there are grants,
Okay.
there are sponsorships,
Sure.
there are philanthropic gifts, but the individual donor is essential. And why is that? For several reasons. One, the strength of the organization, of any organization that's a nonprofit, is the individual donor, because foundations change their funding
Sure.
commitments.
Yes.
Sponsorships can go and come with the economy,
Sure.
all right? But the individual donor, that is representative of the individual's commitment.
Sure.
From the funding, other sources, it's important for them to see that you have the community support.
Sure.
It's like a leverage. It's like a leverage. As my mother's mother would say, talk is cheap.
Sure.
It takes money to buy land.
Absolutely.
And so the individual donor is that commitment. And so that's part of it. And I would say that in this instance, it's not talking about necessarily $50 or $100 or $1,000. We're talking about $10,
Sure.
$25,
Sure.
$15. We're not saying that you to give instead of your mortgage payment.
Right.
It's not saying that if that you're asking for a gift instead of buying groceries. But there certainly are millions of our people
Sure.
who have the ability to invest in our heritage.
Sure.
And you have to think, if we don't want to invest in our heritage, why should anybody else?
And I really appreciate you saying that. Of course, we live in an era where one of the key phrases we hear a lot about, it's actually an outcry in terms of the African American experience and some of the atrocities that are targeted toward us. But we are quick to say that Black Lives Matter. Well, if Black Lives matter, then Black history ought to matter, because without Black lives, there can be no Black history. But more importantly, if Black history matters, then Black dollars are necessary to help to make this happen. And so I appreciate you saying that. We do know that we can do it. I want to say, in a way of congratulatory expressions to you, and certainly to the people of Eatonville, because they have been a great example of what I perceive to be Black sustainability. I want to talk a little bit about that. I do know that you are the oldest Black township in America, but I actually I've been in the publishing business now almost 27 years, and one of the grandest experiences of mine was to have gone to a Black township in the place of Mount Bayou, Mississippi.
Oh, yes.
At that time, I only knew of the three, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do know that Eatonville is the oldest.
Incorporated.
Incorporated, absolutely, and it is certainly the most prominent, not just here in the U.S., but around outside of the American experience as well. There's Allensworth.
Absolutely, in
Out
California.
in California, and there's Mount Value, Mississippi. And I just wanted to bring this and just kind of show people, years ago, we were able to go to Mount Value, Mississippi and do a story there. And it was just such an awe-inspiring event for us. It's something that really changed my life, and I'm very proud. And who would have known that years from now, then I'd be in the presence of somebody who really knows about that. We are thankful for what Ms. Hurston has meant, and I think about it, we know that she passed back, I believe, in 1960.
60, that is
yeah,
correct.
and so isn't it amazing that the spirit lives on and the standard of accomplishment. I want to talk about that because you two have a book here that
Yes.
is, to some degree, a tribute to that, and let's talk about your book.
Well, in fact, I was privileged to compile and edit
Okay.
Zora Neale Hurston, A Woman and Her Community. This was the first indication to us, frankly, that the Festival of the Arts and Humanities was a viable commercial proposition.
Okay.
In January of 1990, January 25th through 28th of 1990, in the community of Eatonville, population 2,500,
Okay.
on a good day, that 3-day weekend, we saw 10,000 people
Wow.
come to the. So shortly after the conclusion of the first festival, the Orlando Sentinel, the publisher of the daily newspaper in Orlando, and also had as a unit the Sentinel Communications,
Yes.
asked whether we thought that there would be an interest amongst the African American reading audience for a coffee table style book.
Yes.
That represented the fact that number of people coming, so many of them from around the country, that represented a market, a market share.
Yes.
And so the direct result of that inquiry was the book that I was privileged to compile and edit with an essay by Alice Walker. So this is, it's all of it comes together. Okay. But again, as we've talked, an essential part of that funding formula is the individual donor.
Sure. Okay, well, we certainly are thankful that you've come here. We've had a wonderful event here with your presence here. Had a great reception last evening. You want to talk a little bit about that and how impactful that we believe that it was for all of us?
At the home of Dr. Leo Edwards
yes,
and
ma'am.
his wife Irene.
Irene, absolutely.
We were hosted with what I would call an opening reception in honor of SAAACAM's introduction to
Right.
to the San Antonio community.
Yes, ma'am.
It was a lovely evening, jazz, fine food, and we were privileged as a part of that program to have Everett Fly, the 2014 medalist, Humanities medalist.
President Obama.
President under the administration of President Obama presented. He is a San Antonio native.
Absolutely.
So he talked about the kind of original research, primary research that he is doing and in uncovering and documenting the unexplored history of African Americans in San Antonio. And I had the privilege to make some small presentation reference cultural heritage tourism as it relates not only to the Eatonville experience, but what is possible here in San Antonio.
Sure.
And then today on the 24th, we have done a series of programs, one at the Davis Middle School.
That's right.
With 6th and 7th graders who have identified their interest in culture and heritage. And later this evening, as a matter of fact, we will leave the studio and move right on to Carver Library for a reading. So this has been a wonderful 48-hour immersion into culture and history, heritage in San Antonio,
Yes.
reflecting the kind of experience, positive experience that we have and continue to enjoy in historic Eatonville.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And on that note, I certainly want to kind of give a shout out, if you will, again to Dr. Edwards and his lovely wife, Irene, and their daughter, Michaela, who made a special presentation to you at the end. I thought that was great that she was able to be, because I think children learn by those kinds of examples. And so, and then the children affect with that at Davis Middle School. And certainly we want to thank Miss Hall Johnson, the librarian there, and that very accommodating faculty and staff for allowing us to do that. I think it's important that we start to give them formative type experiences that will help to shape their mind and create an appetite for substantial achievement, if you will. And
Absolutely.
So again, and you had such a nice way of delivery with them, and you kind of loosened them up, and it was a great experience. So again, I want to thank you on behalf of SAAACAM. The museum is going to be a wonderful gift to the city, and I want you to know it's not, I never wanted to say it's coming. That train has already left the station, and I think you can bear testimony to the fact that we're moving in a great direction. We do actually want to make sure that we incorporate more people to help with this great endeavor. We often say that it takes a village to raise a child. It takes an even greater village, a more committed village, if you will, to share this great story as it pertains to the African-American experience here in our fair
Absolutely.
city.
Is
So-
there contact information where the viewing public can reach out to SAAACAM?
Yes, absolutely. There is. We do regular publications, certainly through Snap newspaper, which, by the way, is the oldest African-American museum here. African-American newspaper here in San Antonio. But you can also go through Hope House Ministries, Mr. George Frederick, and I'm glad you asked that, because it would not be proper if we did not mention George Frederick.
Absolutely.
And this whole project was actually birthed through the historic value and all of that as it pertains to the Sutton House there. That's another story we'll have to tell one day very soon. It's a very rich and a very unique story. But in as much as he was able to acquire that land, we found out that there were historic individuals who were coming, like George Washington Carver and Thurgood Marshall, going in and out of that house. And so that essentially it became the incubator for where we are here today. So if there are anybody, persons who may be interested in joining us, you may do so by reaching us at area code 210, and that number is 313-2038. Also, as publisher of Snap newspaper and as a vice president of that museum endeavor, you may reach Snap News as well. Area code is 210, and that number is 3810912. So again, I want to thank you so much
Absolutely.
for
Thank
your
you for the
presence, and we
opportunity.
look forward to doing it again. Thank you.
Thank you.